Voices serves as the megaphone for individuals who have endured transformational change. By highlighting trials and triumphs, our desire is to create a safe space for pivotal conversations, which in turn will deepen the story and provoke hope for you, our listeners. As you may know, change is never easy, but it is inevitable. You are not alone in what you're facing. Your transformation is possible, purposeful, and now. And here's Aaron Wiggum, founder and managing director of New You, with this week's guest.
Welcome to another edition of New Voices. My name is Aaron and I am the host here of New Voices. We have a wonderful episode that you're just going to enjoy. I know it. This man who I'm bringing to you today, he is a founder. He is a serial entrepreneur. He is the leader of a venture capital fund. He is a father. He is a husband. He is an ecosystem stimulator. He is a thought leader in all areas. And I've known him to be a friend over these last 3 years. I bring to you none other than the one and only Michael Basch. Mike, welcome to New Voices.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So I want to start at the very beginning, Mike. Take us back to growing up in SoCal and what that experience was like as young Michael Basch.
So I was born in San Francisco, but raised in Los Angeles. My parents both worked in nonprofits in the Jewish community. I would describe both of them as people that were really focused on making the world better. Mm-hmm. And a very kind of an early influence in my life was my grandfather, my mom's dad, who was a World War II veteran, kind of GI Bill guy. I think he sold vacuums door to door at one point. Ooh. And at 8 years old, he taught me the business of lemonade. Mm. And at a quarter cup in an intersection, a block from my house, kind of a busy intersection, and I would sell lemonade for a quarter. And I recognized there was like 4 corners of the intersection. I would go to cars at the red lights, and there's lots of traffic in LA. And I was only able to really cover one corner at a time. Right. And so I hired 4 of my friends the summer of 9 and paid them $5 a shift, which was 2.5 hours. And aside from the fact that it was child labor, sweatshop labor below minimum wage, no low food certificate, not paying taxes. Like I don't know the statute of limitations of these things. Yeah. I learned the business of revenue, cost of goods sold, labor, and
supply and demand,
and made like $5,000 the summer of 9, nice. Which is like today's dollars is like I don't know, like $20,000 or something. Yeah, and so I've always kind of had a thing for business, but at the same time, both my parents were nonprofit, and my mom kind of made me volunteer at her nonprofit. Like kind of for every hour I'd sell lemonade, my mom would have me volunteer an hour as well, and so I volunteered in the morning. And sold lemonade in the afternoon. My mom actually worked for what was called the Shoah Foundation, and interviewed Holocaust survivors because my grandma survived Auschwitz. And my job was to catalog the testimonies of these Holocaust survivors. I probably watched hundreds of testimonies and cataloged them. And wow. And it really I'll circle back on it, but it left a very lasting impression in terms of humanity, what humanity is capable of, and some of the lessons from that period of history. And so. So that was like my youth. Did that kind of probably through my bar mitzvah. And then I kind of got a little bit into computers and did some computer consulting when Windows 95 came out. and then I started, the first real kind of, I know that you really have a focus on, what are really pivotal points in people's time. Yeah. So my dad, didn't work for a year around when I was 13 and he did some consulting work, but basically by the time we were 16, I would say, we were having, my parents were very much focused on doing good and less so than doing well. Right. And we kind of ran out of money. And my mom and dad divorced. I think, you could argue my mom left my dad. We lost our house. So I got a second mortgage and then lost our house. And it was my dad's dream house. And looking back, man, we really did have a wonderful house. And I never really appreciated it enough. And And my dad had a heart attack the day we lost our house. And I walked in on my dad on his office floor. I was 16 years old and he was purple.
Wow.
And, we took him to the hospital. And I remember it was like November 2020. And I remember really vividly thinking to myself, man, like, I have all these friends whose parents are lawyers or bankers or doctors or kind of anything. And no one's losing their house.
Right.
And having these kinds of issues. And so I decided I'm going to become a capitalist and forget that do good stuff. And I'm going to do well and, own my own finances. And I looked for a job and got a job at a coffee shop. And if I wasn't in school, I was at that coffee shop working. And I worked kind of 24/7. Everyone associated me as the coffee bean guy. And I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed, the efficiencies of it and improving the schedule and improving the ordering. And I convinced some of my friends to work there and eventually became the assistant manager and then the general manager and then went to college. And while I was in college, I opened up a store a couple blocks away and then opened up a bunch of stores. And by the time I finished USC at 20, I finished USC Business School at 24. By the time before I finished USC Business School, I was overseeing 22 shops, $19 million in revenue, give or take, 400 people. And really had same premise as Lemonade, I had my revenue, I had my cost of goods sold, I had my labor, maybe some rent and some other utilities, but that was the basic premise of the business.
Yeah, much more overhead, but
more overhead, same concept. Some of the same employees, maybe. I don't think kind of grew up with me, and so that I was in the coffee game. My friends at USC, I joke that USC is the fastest way to get a couple $100,000 in student loans.
Yes,
not inexpensive. And my friend started a t-shirt company selling t-shirts. I joined as the fifth partner, and we bootstrapped that business to around $37 million in revenue and sold it to a publicly traded company. It took me, to New York and to London. It was a product manufacturing business by the end, and that was like the experience of a life building that company. There's a lot of different stories I can give about that thing, and they really are fun. But while doing that, we had at one point opened up a nightclub. Yeah. At one point, I had a condom subscription service. Neither of those worked out, but both were good experiences, and happy I did it. And invested and started investing in some real estate and some startups, and kind of really got into a variety of forays of business. And when I was in London, here I was, 30 years old. I decided to have a 30th birthday in the south of France and invite 77 of my closest friends. This is a 5-day thing, and kind of looking back, it was kind of like a mini wedding for myself. Yeah. And I remember waking up the day after my 30th birthday in the presidential suite of the Carlton Hotel in Cannes, and with a wonderful girl who was not right. We were not, not the right person for me long term. And thinking to myself, what am I doing with my life? And really, I remember, my parents had a real focus in Judaism. There's a thing called Tikkun Olam, which means repair the world. Okay. Like, humans are here. We're born into existence with the purpose of repairing the world, making the world better than it was that we were brought into. Yeah. And I'd lost that. I'd really just focused on a kind of making money and being financially independent and traveling and kind of living indulge the finer things in life, and really lacked depth, and purpose. Yep. And I decided, man, here I am 30 years old. I don't want to wake up at 40 feeling the same way. Yeah. And so I called up my partners. I took a sabbatical. I moved to Israel. Took the summer off and cleared my head. And by the end of the summer, I realized I didn't want to do this anymore. I wanted to do something more mission driven. But at the same time, I moved to Israel in July of 2014, and war broke out with Gaza like 5 days later. And so Israel kind of shut down. Right. So I had some time on my hands while I was there. And one of the companies I'd invested in asked me to come on board to help them, grow. And so I started doing some consulting with them. It was a mobile user acquisition business, helping apps launch essentially. And we actually launched the dating app Bumble and Uber and a bunch of others. And by the end of summer, they convinced me to be the president. Now remember, I wasn't looking for another big startup opportunity. I was kind of really trying to do something more, but hey, here I am, and this is what I know. And they asked me to run it, and it was interesting and intellectually interesting. And so came on board to run that. That company really took off. Under 2 years was at $16 million in revenue. Wow. 45 people across 4 countries. I mean, it really was a sprint and fun. And that took me back to New York. And, I got to New York in the beginning of 2015. Hillary Clinton, Secretary Clinton, it's a Freudian slip. Secretary Clinton announced her campaign in April of 2015, and I joined as like the 5th volunteer or something like that. And I would go there, many days a week, probably 15, 20 hours a week volunteering while running this company. And I felt a sense of kind of doing good and doing well.
Yeah.
I really believed I felt and still do feel she's the most qualified person to ever ran for president. And it would have been an amazing thing for America and the world to have a female leader of the free world. If you look at COVID, it was all the female leaders that I felt actually handled it the best. And I kind of was building the company and was working on the campaign. And I went to the Democratic National Convention, and I can't remember offhand what the order was. Maybe the Republican National Convention was first. But I watched the RNC and went to the DNC, and I was watching the RNC and listening to Laura Ingraham and listening to Rudy Giuliani and listening to, it's Christie and then eventually Trump. To me, I had this kind of out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
This is another kind of real moment of real change in direction. I remembered those videos I watched as a child volunteering at the Shoah Foundation, cataloging these Holocaust survivor testimonies, as to, people asked why no one left 1930s Germany or what was going on then. And they said, it wasn't that, Hitler was this horrible person or the Nazi party was a horrible person. Because like here in America, we have right-wing folks, we have anti-Semites, we have racists. But it was normalized by the rest of society who just went to work. Who just did nothing.
Inaction.
I think, Dr. Martin Luther King kind of said something along the lines of like, the problem with society is not the problem with society, there's many, but is the moderate.
Right.
The moderate who says, I stand for something better, but I'm not really going to do anything.
Right.
This isn't what I believe in, but I'm only a moderate. What am I going to do? And even though Secretary Clinton was up by like 9 points at the time, I told my board, I told my board we should move the whole company to Wisconsin. And they told me, you're crazy. You're not really in the right place to run the company probably. So I moved to Wisconsin because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. If somehow, Trump became president, and he did. And so, it's what I needed to do, and I'm happy I did it. We lost by 11,000 votes in Wisconsin. I can honestly say there's probably more we could have done, I could have done, and it's something I, really think about. And after we lost, I couldn't get myself to go back to my startup. I briefly ran for mayor of New York on social and economic justice and generational-led change, which is a great story for another day. But happy I did that, but happy I dropped out. A big lesson there for me was I'm very comfortable talking to you about what we should do to help people.
Right.
But talking to the people, on my way here, I was walking with a colleague, and I might even get emotional if I say this, so I gotta be careful. But there was a family behind the baseball stadium, behind One Oak Field, of a mother and a father and their 2 kids, dressed pretty roughly. One of the kids didn't have shoes. The other kid was kind of crying because the shoes didn't fit. The parents didn't look like they were doing well, to say the least. And man, when I ran for office, both in working for Secretary Clinton as well as running myself, like those are the people we want to help.
Right.
And I could talk to you all day about the things that we should do to help those people, but could I go up to them right there and then, or in general, and say, hey, vote for me, and I'm going to help you get out of this place that you are. I'm going to help you get unstuck from the circumstance that you're in, that your kids are in. And like, even I might have the best of intentions, you got to really believe you can deliver on that kind of promise.
Yep. Can you actualize it?
Can you actualize
Yes.
it? Like, and to me, the burden of that self-doubt of wondering if somehow if I end up becoming the mayor, what if these folks' lives are worse?
Right.
I mean, there's a non-zero chance of that. Who am I to run a $90 billion budget with 400,000 people? You have to really believe, even with the best of intentions, that you can actually deliver on the promises that you're desiring to. And so I dropped out. And that was probably the lowest point of my life. I barely could leave my house for 6 weeks, which if you know me, I'm pretty extroverted. I could barely stay in my house for 6 minutes normally.
How long did you run?
I ran for 4 months and 4 days.
Okay.
And I had 7 full-time staff, 6 part-time staff, 40 interns, 2 campaign offices. I mean, it was a little operation. And I'm happy, and I ran a bunch of events, raised a bunch of money. I'm happy I did it, and I'm happy I dropped out. And it was a very dark, I didn't know where to go next. Is the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
I actually had someone that booked me a ticket. I never went on a vacation by myself ever, except for after that, someone booked me a flight to Mexico to go see the beach and just get space and find yourself, and I did.
Yeah.
And I came back and I did some consulting and a little more investing, and I kind of built back up my confidence. But in a way, I was kind of probably more open. I've had the pleasure of introducing 12 married couples, 21 and a half children from those couples have been born. There's one in process right now.
Wow.
And in one of those couples was a gal from Tulsa.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I could almost say, the world's an interesting place, because I don't know if I would have been as open to visiting a place like Tulsa if I was in my normal state of mind in New York City. I mean, as a coastal elite, you know. But I visited Tulsa, and the gathering place was a year away from being open, and the arts district just opened 36 degrees north and some apartments, and kind of felt like some momentum was building. And I got connected with the George Kaiser Family Foundation, and at the time, 99% of their philanthropy was here, but 99.9% of their investment was not here, and they're doing nothing early stage. And one of the big lessons for me from Wisconsin was, Milwaukee and Madison were doing fine, but when you went to like Oshkosh and Green Bay, you could see beat up houses and empty factories, and you could see people felt left behind. Yeah. And in places like Tulsa, fossil fuel based industry, old industry, making America great again. Looking back at some of these older industries, I could see how that would resonate.
It looked bleak. Yeah.
And so helping GKFF think through the early stage investment strategy, how to diversify the economy, how to keep the smart, talented, young people from leaving, because you have a huge brain drain and those kinds of things, and then doing so through the lens of a founder and a startup investor. And so, together we kind of started doing some local strategies and some local investing, and then we built Atento Capital, which invests in. We say we unlock unsung potential through financial and human capital and bridging networks, and we really say, there's a huge swath of, most simply, talent is distributed evenly in society, both geographically, racially, gender-wise, but opportunity is not.
It's not. That's right.
And if we can help focus on the places that have the same talent, places and people that have the same talent but not the same opportunity, there's there's economic upside in that, and also the ability to unlock real potential in that.
Absolutely.
And so that's what we do. It's fun. And it's meaningful. And it really is, hopefully, I like to think of the intersection of doing good and doing well. Yeah. Which to me is and it's nice, there's now 12 members of my family in Tulsa. I joke we're 1% of the Jewish community here, population. But that, allows me to both, play a role to help with the finances of my family, as well as to kind of honor the tradition and values that I was raised by, and by my parents and Judaism as a whole of Tikkun Olam. And so that's how I spend my time.
Man.
It's a long story.
No, it was great. It was great. We can go home now.
Yeah,
No, thank you for taking us through that timeline. It's such a powerful story, Mike. And I've told you this a million times. I'm going to tell you again. You need to write a book. Yeah. All right. It's now documented. You need to write a book. So I want to go back to the clips that you had to watch of the Holocaust survivors. All right. I'm intrigued by how those images, or the sum of those images, has bubbled up in your life at different times, right? I want you to speak a little bit to I want to look at that as an investment in you. Right, because you said you became this capitalist. You're from selling lemonade to selling coffee to selling whatever, right? But that was really an investment into your character to have to, as a child, chronicle these things, or to catalog these things, and then for it to bubble up years later on, it was a grounding. It sounds like it was a grounding point in your life. Can you speak a little bit to that from an investment lens, how that was an investment into who you are as a person, having to do that role?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think what an interesting society it might be if we organized collectively to have old age homes have structured babysitting of 6 to 10-year-olds, in which like the old people would get the stimulation from the kids,
right,
and the kids would get to listen to stories about the old people, and like the experience transfer and the empathy that it would like give the children would be kind of priceless, and it give purpose to the old people, and like what a kind of no-brainer, right?
Yeah.
And I think like, especially as I look at my life for the most part throughout, I've always been very fast moving, hard charging, not leaving a ton of time for headspace, which is maybe not something I should really work on. And so, that experience where most of my friends were either at camp or at the mall or playing video games. Yeah. Here I was like in a dark room, like cataloging, these videos of pretty heavy things. And I do, I don't know if there's trauma from it, but I do think it's led me to, it truly did. It was an out of body experience that I had to go to work for.
It had to be.
Like it wasn't something like I had to. And when we on the state of Oklahoma banned abortion in June with Dodd's, or I guess the Supreme Court had Dodd, and the state passed abortion. I remember my daughter, Olivia, was born, I think, a week after that. And we had her baby, did a baby naming, and I was in tears. And it's like, here will be all of these poor women that won't have control over their bodies, all of these kids who will be born into really rough circumstances that will have a society that's not really doing much to help them once they're born. Yeah. And God forbid, my daughter has, there's a woman gets pregnant and there's complications, et cetera. It's like, it's not in all situations can they even get the access to the healthcare they need. Yeah. And so I did the best I could, and I'm still doing the best I can to try and I am with a group of people that are like working on brainstorming and actioning different things to make progress in female reproductive healthcare. And I might be the only straight white male in that group. But like, I feel like it is my obligation, our obligation as a society, as someone that is least personally impacted to take deep action to try and fight for those that are most personally impacted. Absolutely. And as a society, that is what didn't happen in the 1930s and 40s in Germany. And like that, like some of those lessons, the older I get, the more I realize how little I know. And the older I get, the more I realize that, especially if you listen to a lot of things now about empires falling, et cetera, and the United States is, I'm getting economics, so I'll get off it. But there's much to be learned from history.
There is.
And so, watching, if you are watching 100 plus firsthand 2 hour plus testimonies of a period of time from different perspectives and different learnings and different the areas of focus and ways and overlaps and differences, really gave a pretty specific insight and worldview on takeaway of that is always in somewhere my mind or soul of a factor in decisions. Yeah. And I think different people have different versions of that for themselves. And I think it's important to connect to that and know that that's within you and incorporate that how it makes the most sense for you.
Absolutely. One of the things I appreciate about you most, Mike, is that you know how to win. And you know how to even make things that don't work still a win. A lot of people struggle with that, right? When you look at the wins of the stories you just told or the timeline you just laid out, how do you prepare yourself for the next thing that you're going to go into? Because it sounds like your wins are not necessarily prescribed, but they happen organically. Like you know, the guys with the t-shirt business and, you're the fifth person in, right? You weren't the one with the idea, but you were brought into the idea, right? So like, you know how to position yourself for these wins. What is the mindset you go into into the next journey? I guess is what I'm asking you. How do you go into the journey and prepare for it, being that you have this track record of winning?
So winning is an interesting and subjective. Winning is a subjective term.
Yeah.
And I think the term is win is only defined by how you define the game that you're
playing. Yep.
And so life isn't linear.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that might have more. There's people in my fraternity who are the same age as me that are billionaires
mm-hmm.
that have had huge professional success.
Mm-hmm.
And there's people who might not have made so much money, but have 4 or 5 kids and live a very religious life, and they have huge fulfillment and winning from that.
Yep.
And there's also people who might say they have the best quality of life.
Correct.
And they have no interest in having kids, and they have no interest in making money, but they work out a ton and live super healthy and on kombucha and yoga and all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think defining, getting in touch with yourself and not the influences of society,
mm-hmm.
and focusing on what winning is to you.
Right.
I grew up in LA. In LA, normally winning is kind of how you're connected to entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you know? Are you going to the latest premiere? What TV shows are you watching? That's a whole life there.
Yes.
And I realized at some point in time, between living in New York and London and everywhere else, that's not what winning was for me.
For you, exactly.
And actually, Tulsa for me, I realized I think if you're trying to maximize, I believe as a society, we owe it to ourselves, our families, our community to maximize our human potential.
Yeah.
And to help others maximize theirs.
Absolutely.
Which you're in the business of.
Yep.
That's how you're spending your time aligned.
Yep.
I don't think there's a better place on earth if you are passionate about that thing than Tulsa, Oklahoma, to pursue that.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm surrounded by also lots of people like you and Jesse, who also do that.
Right.
And it creates a society and a culture here around that. And I feel at home here.
Yeah.
And so I look at all of the things I've done, and some of them have worked incredibly well.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them have totally not. But for example, we launched this condom subscription service. Worst idea. I really appreciate my brother. My brother's the one that actually physically launched it. I funded it and helped guide it.
Uh-huh.
And
what was the impetus for that? Let me.
So when we had this product manufacturing business, I saw the Dollar Shave Club commercial.
Okay.
And I wow, Michael Dubin lives in LA. I live in LA. My name is Michael also. I'm going to find this guy.
Got it.
And I get in touch with him 2 days later.
Uh-huh.
Get a meeting with him a week later. I'm hey, let me make your handles for you. He's like, no, I have my handles sorted by these guys in Korea, but you can make my razor blades. And I was like, all right, blades. So make blades for him. I think $140,000 worth of blades, some number like that.
Mm-hmm.
And send him an invoice. He's like, I can pay you in cash or stock. And if we would have taken stock, it sold for $1 billion 2 years ago or 3 years ago. If we would have taken the stock, it would have been something like $40 million.
Wow.
And it took $130,000 or $40,000 cash.
To get rid of you.
So that might not be considered a win.
Right.
But I learned a big lesson on that
right.
of I need to get smart about venture capital and equity and all these things I was not smart about.
Yeah.
And one.
Mm-hmm.
And so going into this condom subscription service, the same premise of buying condoms is kind of embarrassing, kind of annoying. And we can just ship it to you once a month and you can keep it in your drawer and we can make it cool and da-da-da. And, we didn't do enough customer discovery, and it turns out some people, most people are in relationships, or most people get in a relationship and at some point they cancel the subscription, or most people have unpredictability, lack of predictability on how often they meet. Yeah. So everyone inevitably cancels it. Too much churn. Didn't make sense.
Right.
But the lesson, and so we launched it, we had a bunch of customers, but we churned too much. And the lesson was we didn't do enough customer discovery.
Yeah.
And so now every time I talk to a startup, I really push on, it was an expensive lesson, but a good lesson. And both those lessons, you're young as long as you want to continue to learn.
Exactly.
I believe. But I was relatively in the spectrum of the average human, young, under 30 for both of those lessons. And so, now here I am. I know about investing in startups and equity. That's what I do for a living. And the companies I work with, I can talk to them about my personal failures and due to lack of customer discovery, and hopefully they don't have to make the same mistake.
Yeah.
And so And so even though those are both clear losses, and one which I could have like tens of millions of dollars, and the other one I would have saved, low six figures and a bad company idea. Like I've been able to make a career from those lessons.
Right.
And so it's still, I think, a huge win.
It is a win. It is a win. And that's what I mean by the wins. Real quick, I wanted to ask you, did you all consider pivoting from the condom subscription to maybe feminine product subscription? Because it is more routine and it is more,
I think that's probably a way better idea.
Yeah.
And I think I just didn't,
You're thinking about from your lens.
From my brother and I, both single guys, it was a good failure.
Yes.
Because I think now, knowing what I know now, I'd hopefully find, and we've invested in a business called Sunny Period, which is a menstrual tech business.
Yep.
And so we now that's where we've gone versus condoms for a variety of reasons. And we've invested in people who are better and smarter than us,
right.
in Cindy and Drew to lead the business.
Nice. Yep. Much like pressure too, right?
Yeah.
So I want to have a couple questions and then we'll wrap up. I wanted to ask you, as we talk about these pivotal times, when I first met you, you were not a father. You were newly married, but not a father. And so, you're growing this startup, venture fund, Atento Capital, newly married, and then you understand that you're going to become a father. How has fatherhood evolved you as a pivotal point? How has it evolved you as a man and as a business leader?
Man, fatherhood is a real... There's so many different components to it.
Yeah.
It's reduced my sleep.
Okay.
Look, I've got this amazing son. I run on the treadmill. He runs on the treadmill. He just kind of does everything.
Simba Mufasa. Huh?
Everything I wanted. Exactly. Everything. Actually, we're playing Lion King for him now because it's coming to town. But he'll do anything I'm doing. It just duplicates it. It's kind of crazy. And then my daughter just wants to be with me. Oh. And it's like, man, she gets so excited when I pick her up, and her face lights up when I smile at her. And it's like, it's gonna be hard when it doesn't happen anymore. And it's hard. You want to do all you can. There's unlimited amounts you could pour into kids.
Right.
I think I struggle with the balance of I also want to do all I can for society. Mm-hmm. And there's a heavy weight in investing in humans, both the people that work with us, the people that we physically write a check to invest in their startups. And, you want to know you've done all you can for them, and you want to know you've done all you can for your kids, and the balance of that and your own health and kind of is my Achilles heel and where I really struggle. Yeah. And so I really live with a decent amount of guilt of wondering if I'm doing enough for my kids, and getting, how do I divide my time between the priorities of want to give these kids all they can, and then also knowing that, we're investing in people that also have their own kids that are going through stressful times in their startups, and we want to make sure we do all they can to help them as well about their kids. Yeah. And that is a heavy weight.
It is. It is. Do you think, in leading the fund, do you feel like you have become more tolerant or have you cultivated people more as you begin to, become a father and, a leader? Has it developed you at all as a leader?
I would say the arc of my leadership style, if you look at BAMCO, which is the main company, my career was 9 years or something. Mm-hmm. That company had 5 white men that owned it and leaded it, and then went to 6. As far as I can think of, everyone in leadership that wasn't in physically China, India, or Brazil was a white male, and a very top-down leadership style. Yeah, and we made it work, but I don't think it was necessarily equitable. Yeah. And in the end, few people received much of the proceeds of that exit. Mm-hmm. And it was a real miss. And it was where myself, it was one of the moments where I really realized I just didn't see eye to eye with my partners in that respect. Yeah. And though they're great guys. with Atento and like the way I see the world now, you know, if you look at our leadership team, it's very diverse. It's majority female. Yep. I think it's majority minority. Mm-hmm. And with that comes a variety of opinions. Mm-hmm. And I would argue, you know, I've got influence, but I would argue, I don't know if I'm in charge of this thing. You know, it is, you know, we have a leadership team.
Yes.
And I think we kind of holistically must align on big decisions and directions, because I won't be able to keep the talent I have if I'm just unilaterally making decisions now.
Right.
And so with that, you know, we have strong voices on work-life balance. We have strong voices on, you know, vacation or other policies that, you know, maybe left to my own unilateral worldview, it wouldn't be the same way. And I think that's a good thing.
It's a perfect thing.
Even though I'm not in agreement with all the things we do. Right. I like the fact that we have the right voices helping us decide of them. And I don't need to be in agreement of every decision. I need to agree with the framework and the whys and the outcomes.
The bottom line. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've evolved because of the leadership team we have. And I think I'm very grateful for that.
That's good. That's a perfect answer. I want to bring into focus some of the things that have been going on with you lately and how you've been able to navigate, you know, leading this fund as it's evolving and blossoming, and then, you know, also the work-life balance of that. So, you know, you talked a little bit about wanting to give more to your children, knowing you have to give more to the world. And then how has that played out in your physical life or the stresses that come along with that? Like how are you working through that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think because I have a strong sense of purpose in what I do for a living, mm-hmm. and I don't take lightly the responsibility that comes with being a decision maker on investment decisions. And many people want the time because they want an opportunity to be considered for investment. Mm-hmm. And I also love people, and I want to give people time. And I also love our founders and want to do all I can to help them. You know, I might end up working, if unchecked, you know, 60 to 80 hours a week, many weeks. Yeah. And it doesn't feel like work.
Right.
Now there's times, and because my expectations are high on work product, and because like I believe doing big things is hard and hard work is good.
It pays off. Yeah.
That there's times that I think my expectations can be maybe unrealistic of others, or my, you know, it's interesting. Like I share the same birthday with Elon Musk. How weird. And actually, unfortunately, I drive a Tesla, but I really have not, he's gone very far from home for me, and I would not buy anything else to support him. But he is notorious for setting really high expectations, really rapid timetables, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And he misses many of them. Yeah. But he pushes people really hard and like expects all these crazy hours, et cetera. And he works all these crazy hours. But the people do like life-changing work and mm-hmm. world-changing work. And so there's a component of me left solely to my, like if I didn't marry the woman I married, it was a very good counterbalance to that. Mm-hmm. Like that's what I would be doing as a single person. It's just like I'd be running an organization relentless. Like that. Yeah. And so I got really, you know, an awakening on April 3rd this year, so 2 months ago. Mm-hmm. I woke up without some vision in my right eye, and it turns out I go to the doctor, and I had basically a stroke. Mm. And very humbling experience. And it wasn't directly associated with stress. Turns out I'm hypercoagulable, which means I have thick blood and I need to be on blood thinners. Mm-hmm. And my dad and his uncle all had heart attacks in their 40s, and two died before they were 50, one 46 and one 56. And so, you know, it's genetic, but it didn't help that I was necessarily very stressed around the time the incident happened, I'm sure, and not sleeping enough and all the things. And so I've, you know, I owe it to my family to be around. Mm-hmm. And I gotta put myself, you know, in a position to be there for the long haul, right. and pace myself out and understand that, you know, humans have limits.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to reframe my work at a 50-hour cap per week. Mm-hmm. I have an out of office on my inbox just because so people don't
Yeah.
Wonder what's going on with me.
Right.
And it's an adjustment. And there's pros that, it's forcing a level of moderation. And I think that I have a team that is probably, Tulsa's culturally more on the work-life balance than my New York
for sure
walk and talk pace.
Yeah.
And I think that could be a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially in this climate. My last question, and then we'll do a call to action. Throughout all these ups and downs and ebbs and flows, how do you, or how have you held on to hope? Like what do you pull on? What is your source? How do you hold on to hope when it doesn't work and you run for mayor and it's all falling apart and you feel embarrassed, or you're at your highest point and you had an exit, or you had the birth of your child, or like whatever your high points are, right? How do you hold on to hope?
So I'll speak macro, because I think I spend more of my time in the macro than the micro, like societal things, climate change or democracy or humanity.
Yeah, we see what you spend your time on, right?
And so, you look at the moment right now on Earth. Mm-hmm. You've got a democracy as a whole is a concept, is a good form of government, is struggling here and abroad. Mm-hmm. We've got a quickly warming climate. With that, you've got climate migration and all sorts of complications with that. You've got more regions in various forms of war than any other time, at least in my life. And the possibility of some kind of nuclear situation kind of unfolding in a variety of places could happen. So there's a lot that could go wrong. The U.S. has a huge amount of debt. I mean, there's a bunch of complex issues happening in the world. It's very easy sometimes to failing healthcare, failing education. I mean, I can keep going. And so sometimes I think to myself, man, there's so many challenges for society right now. How is this ever going to work? And is what I'm even working on enough to even help? Mm-hmm. And on the flip side, when I'm in a better headspace, which is most of the time, I think to myself, human beings are a resilient species. Mm-hmm. And I think I have to believe that even though we have these existential challenges and some of these things on climate change or AI or whatever it is, that we are going to, as a society and as a species, solve these issues and continue to evolve because we have to. And it will look different, et cetera. And as an individual, I could either be part of some contribution to on a societal level to those solutions, or stand by and do nothing, or be part of the problem.
Right.
And so I do my best to play a small contributing role to hopefully the humanity going in more of the right direction than the wrong direction, and hoping if everyone else is also playing a small contributing role, then that will start to add up and snowball into the right direction as a species, and hopefully the best possible outcome of the various different possible outcomes we could have.
Nice. Okay. That's fair enough. How do people reach you? What is your call to action?
I'm really easy on LinkedIn, Mike or Michael Basch. I think it's Mike Basch, B-A-S-C-H. I'm on email, m@atentocapital.com. And yeah, look, I think what you're doing new is awesome.
Thanks.
And I think, my wife went through the program. Many of my friends have went through the program. I think helping people find their purpose and passion and how to spend their time and what they want to do professionally, et cetera, is such a core thing to people's personal well-being and their ability to contribute to society. Yeah. And so really grateful, truly. And thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here. Mike, I'll tell you all the time that, I appreciate the call that you made to Pittsburgh to find me. And
lucky to have you.
Yeah, man. It's been 3 years. It'll be 3 years in a couple weeks.
June 13th, maybe?
I moved here
June 17th?
Something like that. Yeah. But it's been a pleasure, man. And I'm really grateful for the blueprint that you've given me, as well as the encouragement and support that you've given me with all of my endeavors. it doesn't go unnoticed, and it's with much gratitude. I really appreciate you, man.
The feeling is mutual. Thank you.
Absolutely. So you just heard another edition of New Voices. I want you all to make sure that you subscribe, like, and share this, as well as follow us on our social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to this episode of New Voices. Visit our website at www.newutulsa.com. That is NEWU Tulsa.com. Follow us on social media at New U Tulsa on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And a special thank you to our producer, Jesse Ulrich. If you're looking for self-improvement, join our free cohorts for personal and professional development opportunities. New U is a way for diverse talent to imagine, discover, and actualize a 2.0 version of yourself. Bring your future into focus.